Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Story Hour. I'm your host, Daniel Marcus. My peerless co-host is Laura Blackwell, and I hope that you are all healthy and safe and taking care of yourselves and your loved ones. We're kind of at the tail end of a very weird time, possibly entering into another very weird time of a different nature, but we always have stories. So thank whatever entities you thank for that. Happy Thanksgiving or Friendsgiving or however you mark the holidays. I started Story Hour in early lockdown. And the idea was just, me and some of my writer friends to have a place to share our work and have not so much community building, but reinforcing community, because I was thinking it was just going to be folks that I knew and we'd, read each other our stuff. But it just has grown so much farther beyond that with a whole lot of help from my partner in crime, Laura. We turned to an ancient and time-honored form of entertainment, which is folks sitting around the fire telling each other lies. So every week we've got two authors. We've got about 30 minutes each, and doing exactly that. Little self-promotion is fine, but no Q&A, no filler, just story. Tonight we're really happy to have Brandon Crilly and Jordan Kurella. So welcome to you both, and thanks very much for joining us. Each week we also ask our guest authors to suggest a worthy cause, which we will shamelessly shill on your behalf. So if you're fortunate enough to be in a position to help financially in these causes, that's great. If you're not, just listen up and be aware and follow up if you're so inclined, and support these causes in whatever way might work for you. Brandon is reading tonight for the Reach Out Response Network, reachouttoronto.ca. They believe that mental health crisis response systems should be designed by communities and for communities. Centering lived experience is the most critical part of finding solutions at work for any community. And that's why the Reach Out Response Network is working to support our communities as we all work towards the creation of civilian-led mobile crisis response teams in Toronto initially, and hopefully beyond, as well as the end of coercive, forceful, police-led crisis interventions. So that's reachouttoronto.ca. Jordan is reading tonight for KYC, the Kaleidoscope Youth Center, kycohio.org. KYC offers a range of programs in support of LGBTQIA+ youth, including discussion groups, a drop-in center, community-based wellness, and others. So please check it out. That's kycohio.org. And you know what, guys? I forgot to ask which of you wants to read first. So I'm going to do so very briefly now. And if neither of you steps up, I'm just going to pseudo-randomly pick somebody.
This is what we call a Canadian standoff, where it's like, you can read for, I don't know, it doesn't matter.
I love that. All right. Since you made me laugh out loud, Brandon, you get to go first.
Perfect. Right.
An Ottawa teacher by day, Brandon Crilly has more than 30 published short stories to date in markets like Daily Science Fiction, Fusion Fragment, and Flame Tree Publishing. Brandon is also an organizer for CanCon in Ottawa, an Aurora Award-nominated podcaster. His debut fantasy novel, Catalyst, is forthcoming from At This Arts in late 2022. And you can find him at brandoncrilly.com or on Twitter at B_Crilly, Crilly. So Brandon, take it away.
Thank you very much, Daniel and Laura, for having me here. This is phenomenal. Such a cool event. And I'm really grateful to be here. I'm gonna follow the rules of very little preamble. But the story that I'm going to be reading from is called The Last Best Defense. It came in a few years ago in this anthology that I have here, 49th Parallels. which is a collection, or sorry, an anthology of Canadian alternate histories and futures. And so my story was an alternate history focused on an alternate version of events in Red River in the late 1800s, which if you're not familiar with that region of what is now known as Canada, there's probably one of the best known Indigenous figures in, I don't want to say mainstream Canadian history, but is Louis Riel, who was the leader of the Métis people in that region, what is now known as Manitoba, and resistance leader there against the Canadian government, and one of many periods of time when the Canadian government has, mistreated Indigenous peoples and fought against Indigenous peoples, for lack of a better phrase. And as a history teacher myself, I wanted to explore a version of events where instead of conflict, we saw cooperation between the Canadian government and the Métis in that region. And the way to do that, at least in this story, involved otherworldly and kind of supernatural threats. So just to give you a little bit of the setup for that. So I hope you enjoy. And the story I said again is The Last Best Defense. Are you certain you're warm enough, Mr. Baird? Thick mittens tucked into his armpits as he trudged through the newly fallen snow, mindful of keeping his balance, even with the path being dutifully formed by his secretary's snowshoes. Eamon Baird was certain that he was going to murder his fellow ministers when he returned to Ottawa. They said Manitoba in October was perfectly livable, smiling the entire time. Sir? His secretary, Harmon, reached for the heavy cap covering his head. I could give you this. Fine, I'm just fine, Baird said as they crested another hill. His calf muscles were already starting to burn, despite years of snowshoeing experience back home. Let's just keep moving, shall we? As he pressed his hands even tighter into his armpits, he wished he had been staying in Winnipeg instead of journeying by carriage from the train station to the Northwest Mounted Police's forward outpost. And that his brief had warned him that the actual outpost and the person he was meeting were a half-mile walk into the wilderness from the old trade road. There was going to be hell to pay when he returned. In case you were wondering, Minister, their escort, Constable Nadeau, said, you don't have to worry about any attacks up here. That's sort of the reason the outpost is out here, isn't it? I suppose so, sir. They crested another hill, and Baird finally saw Fort Mistahimasqua, partially lit by torches and lanterns as afternoon moved into evening. The outpost had started as canvas tents and wooden lean-tos back when the Northwest Mounted Police was founded. Over 10 years, the ramshackle structures were replaced by log cabins, surrounded by a wooden palisade that was more to keep out scavengers and natural predators than actual threats. If the reports Baird had read were even half accurate, a single intruder could tear down those walls in moments before massacring everyone inside. Nadeau waved at two perimeter scouts as he led Baird and Harmon onward. They were both swaddled in thick coats and gloves, with rifles slung over their backs and long knives hanging from their belts. At first, Baird thought they were both Métis. One sported a short scarf with intricate beadwork, and the other a cap with a similar style. As they came closer, though, he noticed the NWMP rank insignia on the shoulder of the man with the scarf. Baird's eyes flicked between both items. That doesn't look like standard dress to me, Corporal. The trooper just frowned at him. Sir? Just making notes as I go, Baird said, and did his best to sweep imperiously toward the outpost while wearing snowshoes. After passing through the guard post at the palisade's gate, they removed their snowshoes, and Baird instructed Nadeau to take him directly to his meeting. Even with the ambient heat from the torches and lanterns, it felt impossibly cold within the fort. Everyone Baird saw seemed to be wearing some combination of field uniforms and the heavy fur-lined garb preferred by the Métis. Many of the troopers sported red caps or vests with Indigenous designs, and several Métis men bore military coats and gloves or variations on service ribbons. Any group that passed seemed to be mixed, and there was a casual comfort among them, everyone trading barbs in French and Michif, until they saw Baird. And then Métis and non-Métis alike studied him with equal apprehension. He had visited military or law enforcement camps before, but the atmosphere he had come to expect from them was totally absent in the fort. A certain amount of doing as the Romans do was to be expected on the frontier, but what Baird saw went far beyond the alliance of necessity that had been forged in Manitoba. The outpost's headquarters sat in a central square that Baird suspected functioned as a mustering area. It was the only two-story structure he had seen so far. A mess hall and what looked like offices were visible through the ground floor windows, but Nadeau gestured at the wooden stairs leading to the second floor. May I ask you a question, Constable? Baird pointed at some of the passing troopers. Can you explain what I'm seeing? To his surprise, the constable simply shook his head. Louis's right, you federal types have no idea. Muttering the name Louis under his breath, Baird followed Harmon to the second level. He acquiesced to a few moments for Harmon to make sure he was composed, and when no one inside seemed to realize they were there, he sighed and hammered on the door as loudly as he could. Instead of an assistant or functionary, the person he was there to meet opened the door himself. He was shorter than Baird, his thick dark hair and mustache streaked with gray. The lines around his eyes matched the difficult life that Baird imagined was common on the frontier, especially when one was fighting a seemingly unending conflict against otherworldly foes. Despite being the former premier of Manitoba and the de facto commander of the United Forces in Rupert's Land, he wore no uniform or insignia, just a gray waistcoat over a plain shirt and pants. With the slightest of smiles, he said, "Mr. Baird, you should come inside. I imagine it's cold out there for you." Miserable as he was, as much as he wished he had never agreed to come here, Baird put on his best politician's smile and bowed his head. "That would be lovely. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Riel." Louis Riel graciously took their coats and hung them next to several others on a rack, while Baird surveyed the simple interior. He was pleased to feel the heat from a wood stove in the corner near a sitting area formed by two small utilitarian sofas and a narrow coffee table. Taller tables were arranged against one wall, papers neatly organized below a series of topographical maps. A separate writing desk was tucked into a corner where presumably Riel did most of his work. Through a door into an adjoining room, Baird could make out a wash station and the foot of a narrow bed. Despite Riel's reportedly deep Catholicism, he couldn't find a single marking of that anywhere around the room. The entire thing was very similar to the Prime Minister's office in Ottawa. Surprising, considering the man here was once vilified by the federal government, only to become the champion of Red River against forces that would have crushed Canada like they had Britain and elsewhere. "I have tea to chase away the chill," Riel said, crossing to the stove. "Please, have a seat." Baird waited patiently as Riel prepared the tea and offered a schooled, friendly smile when he received his cup. Tea was given to Harmon as well, who had taken the chair at the writing desk, where he would keep copious notes during the meeting. "Thank you for coming out this way," Riel said as he sat across from Baird. Instead of the usual meaningless pleasantries Baird expected from a diplomatic meeting, the Métis leader asked, "So what do you think of our fort?" In his head, Baird thought, "I think you have far too much power out here, and that old John should find a way to strip your title so you're less of a threat. If you weren't so necessary to keeping Red River from being overrun, you'd be in chains, and proper Canadians would be thriving out here, and we'd all be better for it. Aloud, though," he said, "you've established yourselves very well. With the government's help, yes. We like to invest in things that are good for the country. Good for us all, perhaps?" Riel gestured toward the room's only window. The monsters out there don't care about ancestry." Baird snorted. "By country, I thought that meant us all." "I'm sure you did." Before Baird could reply to that, Riel added, "I'm surprised at your reaction. Most visitors from the capital have more to say after seeing the fort for the first time." "I did see men out there who would be up on charges of unbecoming behavior if I were an officer." Riel smirked. "Funny, officers have come through and not even hinted at that. But a minister of external affairs knows better, of course." "Mr. Riel, if you don't mind," Baird said, setting down his cup, "I'd like to get to the purpose of you asking me here. If all you wanted was someone to trade barbs, I should have stayed home with a stiff scotch to keep me company. I want to know the government's intention toward Manitoba." As Baird opened his mouth, ready with a statement he had practiced on the train, Riel raised a hand. "Let me be more specific. I want to know whether your treaty with Russia or Japan will negatively affect my people's circumstance." Baird realized too late that he'd let the silence drag too long while his tired mind spun. I beg your pardon? "Under Prime Minister MacDonald's direction, your office is courting ambassadors from Russia and Japan in the hopes of forming a trade and defensive pact with one of them. You're leaning toward Russia, but if the Emperor's people can impress your office, things might shift." "How could you possibly know that?" "Various sources. Besides, with Britain's collapse, this was bound to happen eventually." Sources be damned, Baird thought. It was well known that the formidable Louis Riel had earned respect among many in Ottawa, seeming to amass more supporters every time he visited the capital. But the recent negotiations were supposed to be highly confidential. Someone powerful trusted this man a great deal to be sharing those kinds of secrets. The Prime Minister would be furious. Of course, Riel could have pieced it together based on less precious information. He was right that courting these alliances was inevitable. Britain had held on longer than expected against the intruders, but 30 years of constant fighting was significant. Other parts of the empire had not been able to maintain their stability. Canada had been lucky with its existing infrastructure. Even so, no country could survive on its own forever, when a new portal could open anywhere at any time, spitting out intruders like the ones in Hyde Park, New England, and Rupert's Land. You're better informed than even the most glowing rumors say, Mr. Riel. What exactly do you want from me? Assurances, Riel said. My people were given stewardship over Manitoba in exchange for keeping the demonic hordes at bay. If that service stops being needed, I would expect the Prime Minister to tear up our entire agreement. You don't think very much of the government, do you? Your government has a lackluster record of dealing with people like mine. There was an edge of steel in Riel's voice for the first time as he added, and the rebellion was not that long ago. In 10 years, we've never once tried to renege on our agreement. And as far as I'm concerned, we've dealt fairly with other tribes who were encouraged by your example. Peace and compromise are difficult, aren't they? Even when it's in everyone's best interest. Baird tossed back the rest of his tea. What the hell am I here for, Riel? If you're after a revised agreement to protect the Métis, I don't have the authority. Riel shook his head and stood. No, but you are brokering a deal that will affect the work we're doing out here. He crossed the office and collected a pair of heavy coats from the rack beside the entrance, handing one each to Baird and Harmon. Why do we need these? I'd like you to see something, Riel said as he opened the door, letting the crisp breeze back in. And you didn't dress properly for this trip. And there's a slight time jump. I'm just going to take a sip of tea. Baird's borrowed coat smelled of livestock, a sort of musty odor that he wished he could escape. But the thick fur lining was warm, so he tried not to complain. He had a sudden premonition that he would soon have more on his mind than a foul-smelling coat or the returning ache in his knees, as he and Harmon followed Riel and a party of troopers and Métis out into the wilderness, further into Rupert's Land, where the intruders appeared. This is madness. Why are we going out here? I wish I knew, sir, Harmon said. To show us something important, it seems. Baird couldn't imagine what that might be. Our average day involves at least one patrol out here, Constable Nadeau offered behind them. This isn't an average day for me, Baird said, which is why Louis suggested you two stay close. There it was again. It seemed common practice to refer to Riel by his first name as though he was a close friend. Baird wasn't surprised to hear that among the Métis, but the NWMP seemed to do it as well. How long have you been stationed here, Constable? 3 years, sir. You've never requested a transfer. Nadeau shook his head. There's no greater threat than the intruders, he said, almost exactly the way it sounded on the posters back home. But I can't imagine leaving my friends to fight on their own. We get by better without you here, a Métis man beside him called, grinning widely. They started jabbering back and forth in mixed French and Michif, too quickly for Baird to follow. The Métis man at the head of their party, with a dense beard and wearing heavy furs, hissed for them to be quiet. Nadeau straightened as though he had been chastised by a drill sergeant. The bearded Métis gestured for one of the constables, and after a brief exchange, sent him scouting ahead. 10 numbing minutes later, the constable reappeared and whispered animatedly to the others, who nodded and, to Baird's relief, waved for Timms, the NWMP sergeant in the group. Except the bearded man seemed to do most of the talking, while Timms simply nodded and occasionally offered a question. Who gives the bloody orders around here? Baird muttered. Gabriel, usually, Riel said softly, stepping up beside him. He and Staff Sergeant Timms have developed an effective rapport. Baird realized the bearded man was Gabriel Dumont, one of the most respected leaders beneath Riel. The man's reputation and reported bravery against the intruders didn't change his rank in the established order, as far as Baird was concerned. That's not how this is supposed to work. Dumont clapped Timms on the shoulder as they came to some sort of agreement. By unspoken understanding, the entire group closed into a tight circle. Baird shuffled to stay among them, shoulder to shoulder with Riel and Nadeau. Claude found a pack of wolves, dead, half a day or so, Dumont said. All speared. Speared? Baird asked, but no one answered him. Eyes along your barrels, partners at all times. Usual signal if you glimpse it. NWMP and Métis alike nodded in agreement. Baird cleared his throat, and every eye except Riel swiveled to him with varying degrees of exasperation, making him pause. In that delay, something made the snow rumble. The entire party whirled, forming an even tighter circle around Baird, Harmon, and Riel. The forest was silent, save for the hammering in Baird's chest. Stay low to the ground, Riel warned him softly. He had produced a revolver from within his coat. If anyone gives you an order, follow it. Baird could only nod. Beside him, Harmon murmured a prayer under his breath. Riel laid a gentle hand on the secretary's shoulder. I've learned that prayer does not help out here. Steady, Dumont said to the entire group. Our world, not theirs. Not theirs, the others echoed. And then suddenly something whistled out of the darkness. Baird heard a dull thud and a pained scream as a man was yanked out of the circle, blood splattering as he was swept between the trees. It happened so quickly that Baird couldn't see what had grabbed him. Form, Timms bellowed, and half of their party shifted into two lines, one kneeling in front of the other as both faced whatever had grabbed their comrade. Sight and fire at will. Between shots, Dumont bellowed a command and led the other half of their party away at a crouch, bearing spears, axes, or bayonets. Both halves were a mix of Métis and non-Métis. There were shouts in the distance, more shots from the riflemen, and then a roar that shook the snow around Baird's feet. It reminded him of the first time he rode a steam engine as a boy, the way the rumble of that gargantuan monster had terrified him, convinced the great metal beast was going to consume him and his family. This sound was lower pitched and oddly harmonic, but the stutter it evoked in his chest was the same. Something out there in those trees would tear him to pieces if it had the chance. Lights, Timms called out, and the marksmen reached into their packs, producing torches. These were hurled into the darkness, illuminating a massive shape weaving through the nearest trees, directly toward their group. It was indistinct even with the torchlight, but Baird could make out a bizarre, sinewy body and several dangling tentacles. For just a moment, he was sure that he could see a great blue eye staring directly at him. So he ran. He ignored whoever shouted his name. He had no business being anywhere near an intruder. This entire trip had been a mistake, but he knew how to rectify it. He made it a handful of steps before he stumbled on his snowshoes and plummeted to the ground. Snow blinded him, filling his nose and mouth to cut off his scream. He waved his arms in desperation, not caring that he couldn't see as he crawled forward. And then something heavy thumped to his right, and he froze. Thumped again, closer, and he blinked white flakes from his eyes to see the intruder looming above him, all twisted gray flesh and bone-crunching appendages. It wasn't looking at him as far as he could tell. It was surrounded on multiple flanks by men with knives and spears, torches and rifles. Each man's individual features and clothing were indistinguishable, moving together as they shared a mind, hacking at its body as unbelievably the creature tried to move away from something more threatening than itself. A hand grabbed Baird's arm, and for some reason he expected Riel, but it was Harmon hoisting him to his feet. One moment his secretary was trying to drag him away, and the next Harmon shuddered and stopped moving, both hands resting on Baird's shoulders. Pointed end of a tentacle was just visible through his chest, but he managed to croak, "Run, sir." He was yanked away into the darkness, and Baird couldn't find the will to move as the intruder bellowed and whirled in front of him. Nadeau appeared beside him, shouting for him to find cover until one of the creature's last appendages snaked out, yanking him away as well. Baird stumbled backward as one of the Métis surged forward, screaming the constable's name. And then it was Riel there, pulling Baird further from the fray, as the Métis fought with the fervor of someone losing a brother, and the entire party delivered blows to something not of this world. One more time jump. The forest was too quiet for Baird. He found a fallen tree for a seat as the survivors laid out the bodies of the dead, far from the smoking remains of the intruder. Timms and Dumont spoke over each of the men who had died, both alternating between English, French, and Michif. Someone tied a patterned scarf over Nadeau's chest before bundling his body up like the others. Harmon's body was collected as well, for Baird to sort out when he returned to Ottawa, while he tried not to think about how much he would have depended on his secretary for the associated details. Riel took a seat beside him and offered a metal flask. Baird took a cautious sip, and while what he discovered wasn't the fine scotch he was craving, it was close enough. It isn't easy seeing your first. Even for you, famed rebel leader? Baird asked with the sort of mad smile he knew came from shaky nerves. The stories about me still exaggerate, I see. Baird very much doubted that, but chose not to argue. He watched as the men checked each other's gear, Métis and non-Métis handing weapons back and forth and trading hushed comments. Timms and Dumont wandered away separately, speaking to each man in turn, and then stepped away to share their own private drink. "I'm impressed," Baird found himself saying. "Not that you've held out here, but that you still have the stomach for this." Riel shrugged. "My people share a warrior's blood, don't we?" Baird accepted the sarcastic quip with a wave of the flask before handing it back to Riel. The men were about ready to move. Though travel at night had its risks, camping this far into Rupert's Land was much more dangerous. Baird let the Métis leader help him up. He studied the men as they moved away, recalling the way they had fought together, cohesive and disciplined and indistinguishable from each other in the dark. Men who fought monsters with a togetherness Baird had never imagined, while people like him hunkered far away, confident in their safety and going through their usual machinations. Things won't change for you, he said to Riel. Whatever alliance we broker, whatever else happens, things here will stay the same. You have my word, even if I have to harangue the Prime Minister myself to make him see sense. I would expect no less, Mr. Baird, Riel said, with a polite and diplomatic smile. And then he led Baird away. And that's the last best defense. Thank you.
Thank you. That was delightful. It's customary for us to pause a moment and reflect between pieces. So we will do that. Context switch, shift gears. Deep breath in, out. Okay. All right, that was Brandon Crilly, folks. Thank you very much. That was great. Our next author is Jordan Kurella. Jordan is a queer and disabled author who has lived all over the world, including Moscow and Manhattan. In their past lives, they were a photographer, a radio DJ, and a social worker. Their work can be found in Apex, Glitter Plus Ashes, and Strange Horizons. Jordan lives in Ohio with their perfect service dog and perfectly serviceable cat. Jordan, take it away.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. As Daniel said, my name is Jordan Kurella, and the story I am reading tonight is The True and Otherworldly Origins of the Name Calamity Jane. It was originally published in Beneath Ceaseless Skies in December of 2016. I chose this story because this is the most traditionally USian story I have ever written. And this being the eve of Thanksgiving in the United States, I wanted to read it. But first, a couple of things. Thanksgiving is not only a United States holiday for giving thanks, but also for us to remember that many of us occupy stolen land. I live on land stolen from the Lenape and Mohican tribes. The story I'm reading tonight is a weird Western about a Western folk hero. And I could not, in good conscience, read it without giving homage to that grisly particular part of our American history, considering what those folk heroes were considered heroic for: murder, theft, and stealing land. One more thing before I begin: trigger warnings. They are kidnapping by ferry, profanity, guns, and a corpse. Thank you for listening. Now, on to the story. The True and Otherworldly Origins of the Name Calamity Jane by me, Jordan Kurella, from Beneath Ceaseless Skies, issue 215, December 2016. She haunted fairies. It's how she knew this whole thing was a trap. Jane had passed through Hartville, Wyoming, about once a month for the past 2 years. Until today, it was a town filled with chatter wafting out of every storefront, with a saloon that reeked with sweat and booze and so much wagon traffic it slowed her down. Now the storefronts were silent, the saloon was empty, and the wagon tracks were filling in with dirt. 6 months ago, when Jane had sworn off this job for good, she told herself nothing would bring her back to it. But this she couldn't ignore. There was no way Earl would have passed this up either. He would have known, like she knew now, that there's a fairy inside this gallery painted storm sky blue with the words "Gallery of Dreams open now," arching over the black curtain serving at its front door. And it was open. Jane could hear someone singing inside. And whatever it wasn't human. She had 8 cold iron shells left over from when she'd given this all up, and now seemed the right time to use them. But if things started going south, she had to make sure there was one left for herself. So once there were 2 loaded in her shotgun, she took a step forward, but before her heel could touch down, a witch stepped through that curtain. "Ah, Martha Jane, so glad you could come," the witch said as she approached. This had to be the fairy. She had skin too pale for frontier living and a dress and eyes the same midnight blue. There was a chill coming off of her, like being near a mountain creek. And when she took Jane's cheeks in her fingers, her touch was February cold. We've been waiting so long for this. You cannot imagine. Gotta guess, Jane said. About 6 months. Time is so fluid, the witch fairy said. Come inside. We have a gift for you. Jane grunted, her grip tightening on her shotgun. Won't like it. The witch only smiled, drawing Jane closer. I can't give away the surprise. Come. She let go of Jane's face and walked to the doorway, holding the curtain open. If Earl were here, Jane would have been more cautious, but he wasn't, so she shouldered her shotgun, set her jar, and marched inside the door. There was only one way this was going to get done, and that was her way. At least she wasn't in fairy. There was a dizzying quality to fairy. The ideas of up and down were intertwined, and everything Jane said felt wrong in her mouth. Nevertheless, it was weird in here. The air felt used, like the whole world had breathed it all up before she arrived. And also, she was alone. The witch was gone. That witch fairy had to be magical. If she could disappear or walk through walls, she could probably do other things. And one thing Jane learned about fairies is they like to show off early, which was sometimes a blessing. Let her get a taste of what she was up against. But with this witch's kind of magic, Jane was too rusty, too low on materials, and down one partner to go up a fairy this powerful. If Earl hadn't gone missing 6 months ago, Jane would have been in better shape. Oh, and she'd been looking for him, but he vanished like a typical man. It would just have to be her. The paintings on the walls, the grand table set with all the food she could imagine. The smell of the food was sickly sweet, like perfume layered over filth. She knew not to touch any of it, or she'd get pulled into fairy with no way out. That was the way fairy food worked. But she was so hungry. The whole table was mocking her. She had to look at something else. So she turned to the walls. Each painting was a landscape peppered with people. And although Jane wasn't much for art, looking at it beat staring at all the food she couldn't eat. And she found each picture nice enough, feeling like she could live in each one if she had to. Here was a painting of a forest. There, a castle. Then down the wall, a mountain range. But all those people in the paintings, they felt off, like they'd been added later by someone else. It wasn't until she realized that a painting at a beach with a dancing girl and a cowboy that she realized it. It was maybe the shocked expressions, all the people's faces, or the way they looked like they were caught in the middle of something else. Or the dancing girl wouldn't wear her costume to the beach. These are the folks from Hartville, missing, trapped inside the art, and now they're on display. Was that the surprise? Not likely. Fairies never did anything without a reason, made up with their own fucked up way of thinking. Might not make any sense to these town folk, but she and Earl had started puzzle fairy thinking out to see things the fairy way. The witch wanted something else from her, or had something for her, and Jane wasn't exactly Christmas keen to find out what. Ah, Martha Jane, said a different voice coming from the back of the room. This witch had a friend. We're so glad you came. We knew you would love our invitation, so we brought a guest. Jane whirled around, her shotgun leveled, and she found herself not looking at two fairies, but into the dead eyes of her old partner, Earl. The witch and this fairy in the gallery were holding his head up by his light brown hair. They smiled at her until she lowered the barrel of her shotgun, and when she did, they dropped Earl's corpse to the floor. We have a proposition for you, the gallery fairy said. She stepped into the light, her hair falling over her bare shoulders, grass green eyes losing themselves in her pale face. One we hope you'll keep this time, as your last broken deal didn't work out so well. She nudged Earl's body with her toe. What do you say, Martha Jane? Jane couldn't say anything. Her mind was frozen in shock. All those days spent on scouting jobs, chasing old leads and older stories for a glimpse of Earl's horse or a whiff of his aftershave. She should have stopped and everything came up cold, but no. She'd only gotten bolder, more brazen in her search, and now here he was, exactly as all her nightmares had played out. Good girl, Martha Jane, the witch said, finally willing to work with us. Oh, you'll be pleased with the outcome, the gallery fairy said. We'll free your partner's soul from our realm and let the town go. There was a pause, like they were waiting for Jane to speak, which was meant by her reckoning they had another boot left to drop. There was no sense dragging this out. What else do you want? She asked. You must come with us, the witch said. Earl had always been the talker, getting them out of most scrapes with his silver tongue, while James spent most of her time getting into scrapes by saying nothing at all. But this wasn't a good deal. Even Jane could see that. There was no way she could let them stay here either, and she couldn't let them keep Earl. So yet she found him, and the discovery was ripping so many holes in her. She was finding out to think or keep her eyes dry. She didn't want to see him like this and know he was suffering like it was all because of her. It's time to change the game. I got a better deal, she said. Ah, Martha Jane wishes to counter offer, the gallery fairy said. Intriguing, the witch said. This worked well in our favor last time. That's how your man died, yes? From you trying to bargain. So please go ahead, speak. We're eager to hear what you have to say. He's not my man, Jane said. Is that your entire bargain? Gallery fairy said. Amusing. No, damn it. Jane had to be specific. Let Earl So go right now, and then I'll go to Fairy Will and Life, but you're both coming with me. Is that all? Aren't you forgetting something? No, fuck the town. I don't owe them nothing. This is a good deal, the gallery fairy said. It's way better than your previous attempt. Your man would be proud. I said he's not my man. But you were in love with him from the moment he paid for you. The gallery fairy slid behind Jane, running her fingers down one of Earl's old jackets. Your heart belonged to him from the moment he said, you're a different kind of girl. Bullshit. But isn't it true, the witch asked, moving closer, that he didn't love you back? You cared for him so much. Yeah, he never... You agreeing or not? Oh, Earl, the gallery fairy said, now in Jane's voice. I miss you so much. That was it. Forfeiting contracts was Jane's forte. She raised her shotgun to fire. There was a door at the back of the gallery, shut and latched with a wooden bolt on the inside. That would do. As the two fairies closed in, Jane fired at the door, aiming to hit the frame, or at least the wall around it, but her hands were shaking and she was backing up, trying to avoid the table. There wasn't much space in here, and she missed twice. She'd have to reload. Is she shooting her little gun at us? I think she is. Jane was fumbling with the second shell when the witch twitched her fingers in front of her, plunging the room into darkness. It was thick and blue as the midnight sky and just as suffocating. Jane was suddenly in deep ocean, drowning and gasping for breath. Her hands clutched both shotgun and shell, grasping onto anything to bring her up out of this, help her climb up for breath. But no, this was a lie. She couldn't let herself believe in this. They wanted her to feel she was drowning, to die, gasping for air in a simple building like someone who had no idea what they were getting into. But she was Jane Cannery. She knew better. It was only darkness, magic darkness. And the gallery was still the gallery with the table in the middle and the paintings on the windowless walls. This was no night sky. This was no deep ocean. This was Wyoming. Whatever the witch had done, that power was huge, bigger than anything Jane and Earl had ever gone up against. And there were two fairies in here with that same immense magic, with Earl's soul at stake, her own soul at stake, and a few shells she had left. She was outmatched and had too much to lose. She had to get away, but there was something she had to take care of first. So she darted to the right, but misjudged her distance, knocked two paintings off the wall. The two fairies whispered. They were planning. Didn't matter. Jane knew where she was going and already had a feeling her way to the rear of the building. This place wasn't that big, and since they were still on real, actual ground, it wasn't going to get any bigger. She just had to get there. Are you staying, little girl? The door is the other way, the gallery fairy said. She was a few paces behind. Giving up, just like you did with him, the witch said, riding away like a coward into the night and leaving him behind to die. Her voice was coming from everywhere. It surrounded her, echoing off the walls, creeping up from under the table, dangling like webs from the ceiling. It stopped when Jane reached Earl's corpse. You cannot save him. Only we can do that. Come with us, they said together, and we'll put him back where he belongs. You don't seem interested in keeping your word, Jane said. So how about three play at that game? We did not agree to your deal, foolish girl, the witch said, the words rushing angry off the walls. Violence is not the answer. Did your man teach you nothing? He wasn't my man, Jane said, and she lifted Earl's body with one arm, feeling on the back of the wall with her shoulder. Not ever. So sad for you, the gallery fairy said. She was too close now. Jane had to move faster. You did love him so. She had to make sure these two never got out of this building again. Cold iron fired into the door frames should do it. Then they'd be stuck here forever. Jane had 6 shells left for 4 targets. She'd have to hit exactly. When her shoulder connected with the back door, she stopped and fired a third time. Cold iron pellets hit the reinforced wood, digging in just enough to serve as an anchor. She only had to do it again on the other side of this door, then on both sides of the front, all while hoping these two couldn't figure out what she was up to. So she hefted Earl higher, dragged him a few feet backward until she fired again. Give up, Martha Jane, know when you've lost. Jane's hands were shaking. She couldn't reload like this, not with Earl under one arm in this darkness. She could hear the gallery very close behind her, so she pulled Earl in tight and pushed off the back wall, feeling on the floor to avoid the table. Little girl believes she can kill us with her tiny shot and simple gun. Her voice was wrapping around Jane like a cocoon. You cannot. Their taunts mixed with her fear and a fury that was welling up inside her, sending her mind racing. The mix, she knew, was poison. This recipe of emotions was got her into scrapes that she couldn't win and started the whole situation that ended up getting Earl killed. Anger and fury had given her black eyes, broken fingers, and a dead partner. Now, if she wasn't careful, no, she needed to clear her head. She needed full concentration. Her jaw was already aching from clenched teeth, her arms seasoned from Earl's weight, her mouth had long gone dry from fear. Now the anger was making her speed up. She had to regain control. Damn tortoise won the race, she told herself. Slow the fuck down, Jane. There was a chill approaching, coming slow and sinister like a draft. The witch was getting closer. Jane's shotgun was empty. She had to reload now, but her hands were wild as liquid sweat. She had no choice. She grabbed 2 of her 4 remaining shells and whispered an even older mantra. 2 in the hand is 1 good and shot. Rack 'em up, close it up, good as God. It was supposed to help her get to concentrate and focus, but it wasn't working. She loaded the first shell in a panic. The chill was coming on too fast. Her heart was clawing at her ribcage. Mind was playing tricks on her. She swore. She just felt Earl move. The second shell went in just as which took Jane by the throat, and she was laughing. And the other fairy was laughing. If Jane didn't know better, she thought it was a pretty sound, like carousel music, but she did know better. This meant bad things were going to happen, really bad things. The witch squeezed her throat and brought Jane so close she could taste the ice coming off her breath. The witch said nothing because she wasn't laughing anymore, because Jane had just gotten an idea. Magic wasn't all powerful. It could be outdone by the right tools if you outsmarted it, and Jane had been paying attention. The witch really liked this thick darkness. Let her do the voice thing, disorient people, and no light could get through, except, judging by those tiny glimpses of daylight where her cold iron pellets had sprayed the black wall, well, Jane had 2 shots to figure out if she had the right idea. Feet firm on the ground, Jane closed the brake and fired from the hip, which squeezed harder, seething through clenched teeth. What are you doing? What are you doing? More light peeked through the front wall. Jane had 1 shot to see if she was right. 1 shot if she was headed for death, and all these heroics were for nothing. Witch tried to turn Jane's head to meet her eyes, but Jane wouldn't have it. If she was going to die today, she's going to be damned if she was going to let these fairies get a hold of her soul that easy. No. They wanted all of her. They were going to have to work for it. So she set her arms steady at her side, stiff and solid as a cottonwood tree, through all her fear and anger and wrenching back the second hammer, which drew Jane in till they were nose to nose. But Jane just grinned into the dark, putting some of her malice there. The rest she saved her throwing to the trigger to fire the second shell. Shot hit, sending daylight bridging across the room like signals from 100 stars. Witch screamed, scraping her nails down Jane's throat and then digging them in her own skin while she stood wailing and illuminated. Galiflary flipped the table, sending food flying everywhere. Whole chickens knocked paintings from the walls, pudding spread thick on the floor. Jane crept through it all, holding Earl close. Stop her, the witch said. Stop her. Jane loaded her last 2 shells with steady hands and turned her shotgun, aiming at the right side of the door frame. The gallery fairy was behind her, pulling her back. You'll regret this, Martha Jane. You'll regret this as long as you live. I won't. Jane steadied her arm and fired. The cold iron pellets hit home. Gallery fairy let go, doubling over on herself as the witch writhed on the floor, becoming part of the debris and darkness. Jane walked 3 slow steps to the left and took her final shot. We will never forget this, the 2 fairies called out. We'll plague you for the rest of your days. Your life will be chaos, turmoil, mayhem. You will lose everyone you love. You will never be at peace. We curse you, Martha Jane Cannery. I got what I wanted, Jane said, the shell spent, the curtain drawn back, and Earl against her chest. He was closer now to her than he'd ever held him in life. And this cold, heavy body was comfortable in her arms like it was a natural extension of what she should have done 6 months ago. Standing like this, she knew they were free to go. We will follow you, they called out. You are cut when the curtain shut behind her. The voices cut out as if she closed a book. And in their story, forever trapped inside by the cold iron anchor, she shot into the entranceways. The sun was low on the horizon when Earl finally was in the ground and Jane was tired. She knelt down at his grave with her hat in her hands. There was something she had to see to before she left. Hey, Lord, she said, I'm trying to give you Earl Hinkman. He was a good man, better than most. Didn't deserve what he got. She looked up for some kind of confirmation, but she got none. There's only that wide expanse of airless blue to get lost in. I'm not good at this talking stuff, so if you could protect him like I'm asking, just do me this favor and take good care of him, like I couldn't. Just keep him safe and ask him to wait for me. I'll probably be joining him soon enough. When Jane rode out, she left everything behind her. The storefronts were silent, the saloon was empty, and the wagon tracks were lost in the dirt. As for the fairies, it was time for someone else to take up that mantle. Let them be filled with the danger, wonder, and loss that had occupied her life for 2 years. Jane was done with it, for good this time. She had a curse to get to, and no one could live it like her. The end.
Wow, thank you so much. That was wonderfully read too. I love the energy and the drawl and the multiple voices. That was great. Wow.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, a fine evening of Story Hour this Thanksgiving Eve. Brandon Crilly, Jordan Kurella, thank you both so much for joining us. And thank you all out there for coming by again, as you have for the last year and a half or more, almost every week. Have a great Thanksgiving if that's what you're going to do. Hope you're spending time with loved ones, and stay safe, be well, and we'll see you next time. Next week we have Marie Ness and Maria Haskins. So please join us again. And meanwhile, good night, everybody.
Good night.